We've done the Masters and we've done the cards. What can we combine them into? I've got it. Decks. Let's have a look at the top decks. Now, the top decks, the way that we do it is I look at the spreadsheet and I order it by the position the deck is, and then we have a look at the cards within the deck and their rank, and we look at we rank them, we get their average. The lowest average is the best. We put all those together and that gives us our best decks. Now I am working on maybe a better way of deciding on what are the best decks, but that might be something we do next season, not this season. Right, so this is the top deck based on that criteria for each master. So solos, top deck here, Valorian, super cheap, but it does have that big rocking roller as a removal spell. And of course you get the golem with it. Often, depending on what you're playing against, you might never get to play that rocking roller, but it's kind of like a get out of jail free card. Spire Stag's very strong. It did get a nerf, but it still has that knockback, which can be really important at pushing things off the bridge and just getting you some more of that XP. Right, second place we have Diona. Again, cheap Diona at the low end, and then we have some power at the top end with the Jezra, for example, ATG drone, Harmful Souls as the removal spell. That's likely to get changed in the next patch, but it's interesting to see that being used outside of an accursed. Right, King Puff. Remember, you want a decent amount of Horde in King Puff to try to trigger those Night Puffs at perk 3. And one thing to mention here is we can't really tell what perks are being used by these decks. We can only assume that some of the perks are much stronger than others. Again, in the win rate data set that we spoke about earlier, that does have that data in, and I'll show you at the end of the video how to find that, actually, if I remember. Right, so there's the King Puff. Then we have a Morelia deck, non-accursed Morelia. APEP, pretty cheap cycle APEP. And then we have a Volko deck, taking advantage of the Rage. It's going to split the Shrew Mummer. Spirit Infusion as well to give you more splits. Now we have Milloween with spells, as you would expect. Call to Arms, and we've got the Magma Cannon to be the building that gives the Call to Arms value. Next up we have pretty aggro Ravager deck. Then we have Wrecked, again, cheap at the low end. Pretty cheap overall, to be honest. And of course, because it's kind of a cheap cycle deck, you get the Arcane Barrage spell, which you want to use as often as possible, and you get that real power at the late game. Right, next up we have Mordor, probably using the normal Mordor perk. There's not any really bad revives in this. So it's just going to be trying to put the buffs on the Priestess, on the big units, getting the Rage, getting the heals, getting the spirits. Just kind of a big push deck. Right, closing out the top 1v1 decks, we have a Ratbow deck. Again, cheap. We get the Scrat Horde in there. We've seen a lot of that. Poison Strike for the removal and Jezra as the top end. Stormbringer. We see some range minions in there to get the buff. And the Tass as the big removal. Tronvir. Again, nothing kind of out of the ordinary. Cheap bridge grab, then some DPS and some annoyance. And then Setsu there. Unfortunately, the lowest of those decks. Looks like it's going to be the Setsu using the normal perks since we have a smattering of spells. Right, let's move on to the top 2v2 randoms decks. So the top deck based on our criteria was this Milloween deck. So cheap bridge control, cheap removal, and again we see this Call to Arms. This time it's the Ghost Turret giving you the building to trigger that on. And then it has the Cleaver at the top end, which, as we saw, was a very heavily played card and still very, very strong. Right, next up we have Morelia, and you can see a lot of these top decks playing the heal path. Really powerful healing, really cheap bridge grab, and lots of other stuff that you can do with it. Valorian, here we have a Demon Warrior Valorian deck. So we have the Demon Warrior plus the Arcane Barrage, which is effectively the Demon Warrior of the spell world. Very cheap cycle. Magma Storm to deal with big clumps of stuff, and Ankahesh to help deal with big units. Next up we have a King Puff deck. Reasonable Horde. well, I don't know, a little low on the horde really there to get the night puffs, but very powerful top end. Future past Apex, so no future present, but future past, which is the 3 mana version of it. And of course, it's fairly cheap because you want that to be cyclable. Right. Next up for our randoms decks, and reminder, if you see these little tabs like above the Stormy, that's indication of a wild card. Next up we have a Mordor deck, a Zenshi Mordor, again probably using the standard Mordor perk. Tronvir, cheap low end, powerful top end, pretty standard stuff. Setsu, do we have some spells? We certainly do have some spells. Diona, and then we have a Ratbow deck, and then closing out the randoms decks, Stormbringer with some range minions, so it's definitely going to be using the standard perk. Wrecked, cheap, and then power, something we're seeing quite common there. And again, Arcane Barrage being the spell of choice. Zenshi Ravager, including the Jungle Jumble. And finally, we have Volko. So again, power top end cards that are going to be really difficult to deal with that rage. Propellers Horde, like to see that in Volko because you're definitely going to have something with rage to trigger those, and then some cheap bridge control and Horde. There. Right, and then finally for the decks, we're going to look at the pre-mades. Reminder with the pre-mades, these decks may or may not be built with a specific friendly deck in mind. So the top deck here, we have Morelia, and we start seeing Arcane Bolt a lot for some reason. But yeah, as always, cheap bridge control and then some powerful units to deal with clearing Horde like the Whirly Scrat, clearing single target things like the Cleaver and the Divine Warrior just to tank a lot of damage. Similar sort of thing here for Tronvir, and similar sort of thing here for King Puff, and similar sort of thing here for Ratbow. So you can see we've just got this cheap low end to give you Horde, to give you bridge control, and then the power end to deal with more powerful things. Then we get to Stormbringer, we see a lot of the ranged units to get that marksmanship. Next up we have Apep, similar sort of thing. Priestess, we're seeing a lot more of her. Mordor, now this Mordor might be using the ult perk because there are a lot of bad revives here in the Mordor. If you play it sensibly, then you could get away with it because you do have some top end good revives, but low end there's lots of bad revives. Valorian, again, cheap low end, powerful top end, which is going to be something we're just going to keep saying, I think. Setsu, again, Setsu with some spells here. Not cheap spells though, so she won't be able to cycle that perk 3 as often as maybe you'd like. Could be using the ult perk. And then we have Miloween again, bunch of spells, bunch of tanky units. And then closing out the decks, we have Diona, again, cheap low end. We've got some spells in here. Remember, Diona's traps gives her the extra sort of control tools. And then we have Jesuit of the Void Mother and the Rockin' Roller. Volko, interesting Volko here. Snipers, don't see that too often. Harbinger as well. Something that a lot of newer players struggle to deal with, the Harbinger. Experienced players, not so much. And the Revenant, which can be very powerful. I would like to see, if the Revenant needs a buff, I would like to see it be made slower. Because once it gets onto your tower, although it's going to chunk away your HP, health is a resource, and it's easy to deal with. But once you're trying to deal with it with minions, it can be really problematic. Next up we have Ravager, and finally we have a Wreck deck. Again, future past, but no future present. Right. That's the main bulk of the stuff that I wanted to go through.